This is Chapter 6, Section 2, the history of the U.S. presidents. There have been 45 U.S. presidents, and then President-elect Joe Biden on January 20th, Inauguration Day, will become the 46th president. The first president, obviously, was George Washington. He was not a member of a political party. Republican and Democrats didn't exist when George Washington was president. He also was very against political parties. He thought political parties would divide the nation. How right he really is about that, obviously, today. George Washington ran unopposed in both the 1788 and 1792 elections. No one ran against him. I mean, who was going to beat George Washington? He led the Continental Army to victory in the Revolutionary War. He's a super likable guy. He ran unopposed. The only time it ever happened, he won all 100% of the popular vote and all 100% of electoral college votes. So he was the only president to do so. And he chose to only serve for 2 terms. I'm sure if he would have wanted to, he could have served as many terms as he would have liked. There have been 21 presidents from 21 states. The state that has the most birthplaces of presidents is Virginia, which is 8. And most of these presidents were the part of the first presidents called the Virginia presidents, like Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. They were all called Virginia presidents. So those are some of our first presidents. And they were all born in Virginia. Ohio, surprisingly, has the second most. Here's the 7 presidents. Most notable, Grant and Taft. Pennsylvania actually is only home to 1 president, and that's James Buchanan, and here he is right here. And he's actually known to be one of the worst presidents ever because he was the president before the Civil War started, and he was ineffective at preventing a civil war from happening. So this just shows you where, how many presidents from each state there were. There's a lot of states without having a president from there. Hawaii was Obama, if you were wondering. Sadly, we've had 4 presidents assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, he was shot in Ford Theater right after the Civil War ended in Washington, D.C. He was shot in the back of the head. James Garfield, he was shot by an anarchist because he thought Garfield didn't appoint him a job, and so he in his cabinet, and he got mad at him, and they shot him. William McKinley, he was the one shot by the anarchist. Kind of similar situation. It was a immigrant. He thought that he should have had a job. And McKinley didn't give him, he blamed McKinley for being out of work. And so he shot President McKinley. And then John F. Kennedy, if you know anything about his assassination, there's a lot of rumors floating around about his assassination. But mainly most people think he was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald as he was driving his motorcade in Texas. He was shot in the back of the head from a long distance, but there's a lot of conspiracy theories. But at any rate, these are the 4 that were killed while in office. And what assassinate means to be murder, usually an important person, surprise attack for political or religious reasons. So there was another assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan. He was shot in the chest, but he survived. He was able to continue as president. This was in the 1980s. There have been a lot of assassination attempts. Pretty much every president has, I'll say, assassination attempts against them. Attempts meaning like maybe notes or things like that say, that people want to, attack them. But the Secret Service is in charge of protecting the president and making sure these threats aren't real. and evaluating the situations everywhere the president goes, keeping the president safe. So the Secret Service, that's the federal law enforcement agency that protects the president and other members. So if you want to watch, the Secret Service in action, um, there is actually video of the assassination attempt against President Reagan. So when the president is uh, mobile, he can either go by plane, which is called Air Force One, and that's really Air Force One is the signage for any plane carrying the president, but he almost exclusively flies his plane. That's why it's called Air Force One. His particular plane, his presidential plane, and there's two of them, and one is always ready for flight if there's ever a case of emergency that the president needs to leave immediately. Um, and then there's a presidential state car when he's traveling by car. It's referred to as the Beast. It's a very heavily armored limousine. It's practically a tank that's ready to protect the president no matter the situation. And it's considered the safest car in the world. Here's some stats. It costs, $1.5 million. It's a Cadillac. It's 20,000 pounds. That's actually really heavy. Your average car is maybe 3,000 to 4,000. It has 8-inch thick walls, 5-inch thick windows. I mean, this thing is a tank. It has the president's blood type in there. It is just prepared for anything. The tires can be completely flat and they can still run. It just it has all kind of things. It can even have electric handles. When you touch it, it'll electrocute you. In 1841, these are presidents that died in office without being assassinated. William Henry Harrison, he unfortunately died of pneumonia only 1 month at being president. Back then, in the early 1800s, wasn't uncommon to die of illness such as pneumonia, the flu. So unfortunately, he caught it and he died. He was the first president to die in office, and he also had the shortest term of only 31 days. Then Zachary Taylor, he died of a stomach flu. He died of really dysentery. He was at a party, he ate some bad stuff, and he just kind of died of dysentery. So then we have Warren G. Harding. He died of a heart attack while in office in 1923. And then Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he died of a stroke in 1945. So it does happen. Presidents do die while in office of natural causes. So vice presidents become presidents. There's been a lot of them. Some have become president because their predecessor died, and then they became the next president. Or sometimes, just like with Joe Biden, he was a former vice president, and he was able to become the next vice president. So what happens is when the president dies, vice president becomes the new president. The vice president then gets to choose who their new vice president will be. So also in the Constitution, there's a clear line of succession if the president dies. So if the president dies, then the vice president becomes president. If both the president and vice president die at the same time, and then the Speaker of the House becomes president, and then if all three of these positions die at the same time, and then the president pro tem become president, and then so on and so forth. So there's a clear succession, and then it extends quite long, but it's almost high. It's just super unlikely that any of this even goes past. Highly unlikely that the president and the vice president die at the same time. It's never happened before. So we've talked about this a little bit, but only 3 presidents have been impeached or formally charged of a crime of wrongdoing while in office as president. The House of Representatives must vote a majority to impeach a president. So if they think a president's been doing stuff wrong or illegal, The House of Representatives get together and they vote on it. If more than half of them think the president did something wrong, and then the president is impeached. The impeached president must then stand trial in the Senate, where they will judge if he is guilty or not, or they are guilty or not. But no president has been removed because of impeachment, and all were acquitted of all charges. So, 3 presidents that have been impeached. President Andrew Johnson, he was impeached for firing a member of his cabinet without Senate permission. Seems like kind of a lame reason, but they were looking for anything to impeach Andrew Johnson. And that was one of the things they could definitely pin on him. But he was acquitted in the Senate by only 1 vote. So 1 more vote, he would have been removed as president. President Bill Clinton, he committed perjury, which is lying under oath, and especially he lied to the American people about having a sexual affair with a White House intern. It was a big, messy affair in the late 90s. You couldn't turn on the news without hearing about it. He was impeached, but he was acquitted. And in 2019, just most recently, President Donald Trump, he was impeached by the House of Representatives for abuse of power and obstruction of justice. What he did was he withheld military aid to Ukraine that we were promising them until he would withhold it until the Ukrainian government would give out information on Joe Biden, his rival in the presidential race, son Hunter Biden. He wanted to find out what Joe Biden's son actually did in the Ukraine. Kind of illegal, trying to force someone's hand, trying to blackmail them. So he was impeached, but then he was acquitted. And then there's only but 1 president that resigned, so you can quit being president, and that's President Richard Nixon. And the only reason why he did that was because he was found. It was very clear that he was guilty of wiretapping or spying on the Democratic headquarters, and this led to his. He was going to be impeached, and he was definitely going to be convicted of the crime because there was just so much evidence against him, and so he just resigned. So some facts about presidents. The youngest president was John F. Kennedy. He was the youngest elected president at 43 years old. Technically, President Teddy Roosevelt was the youngest president to take office at 42, but he was not elected. So the youngest elected president was John F. Kennedy at 43. And the oldest elected president was currently Joe Biden at 78 years old. Previously, it was Ronald Reagan, but Joe Biden is currently the oldest president to be elected. And then the tallest president is President Abraham Lincoln. He was 6'4". Especially, that's tall nowadays, but that was especially tall back then because people were just not as tall. And so he was especially tall to everybody back then. And then the shortest president was James Madison, and he was also the lightest president. He was only 5'4". He only weighed 98 pounds. All right, so the 32 presidents had served in the military. 9 were generals, and 26 presidents were lawyers. By far the most popular occupation of any president. And you kind of want the president to know how to know the law. So it's a natural occupation before you become president. So the White House, that's the official residence and workplace for the President of the United States. It's located in Washington, D.C., and it's the headquarters of the executive branch. I think everybody has heard of the White House. It's very famous. President John Adams was the first president to live in the White House, beginning in 1800. But during the War of 1812 against England, the White House was set on fire by the British and burnt down. It is made out of stone, but a lot of it, they had to just rebuild it and fix it up, and it was a lot of work. But the White House was reconstructed, looks pretty much the same as the original one. The original one was built during President Washington's presidency, and he was not able to live in it during his term as president. Then the Oval Office, very famous office of the president, that is literally where he works. A lot of pictures are taken there. Very unique place. And then the president and their family literally do live in the White House, and they have a section of it that's their living quarters, and they can do with it as they like, and then make it theirs while they're living in the White House. So that's what the Obama's living space kind of looked like. Here's the Oval Office, President Trump. You have powerful members of Congress there, Vice President Pence. That is the front of the White House. You can go in front of the gate. That's the closer side you can look at, and that is the back of the White House. And you can only see it from a good distance. And the entire White House is surrounded by a gate. And then you have Camp David. And Camp David is the country retreat if they want to get away from the city for the president. It's located about 60 miles north of Washington in Frederick County, Maryland. And it's used for the president to rest and relax, but it's also used for hosting foreign leaders. You can see George Bush with a Japanese leader. It's definitely used for multi-purpose, and it's just nice. It's a beautiful place. It's nice to take foreign leaders there. They can rest, relax, and kind of discuss things comfortably. And the vice president, he does not live in the White House. He lives in the number one observatory. He lives on number one observatory circle. This is on the grounds of a U.S. Naval Observatory, and it's close to D.C. And the vice president's office, with a lot of the other, because the executive branch is too big for everybody to have an office in the White House. But most of the offices are in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. It's also located in Washington, D.C. It's this big, massive building. All right, that concludes Civics Chapter 6, Section 2.